I went out to the recruiting office with a buddy of mine who really wanted to fly. I didn't know anything about flying, didn't have an attitude about it. I didn't particularly want to walk, so I thought it was a good idea. So the two of us went down there. And he had flown and had some experience as a private plane. And we went down, and he was turned down because as a kid he had shot off a big toe in a hunting accident. And so he was not going to be able to go into the Air Force, so they put him in the infantry. So that here he was not able to walk well. He could, he didn't have any problem, but that was the kind of screening nonsense that did go on. He went into the infantry. But anyway, you signed up, and they gave us until the end of the semester. You know, there was a prearranged deal, and we would wait until we'd finished the semester of school, and then we were called into the service, and we went from Gainesville to Miami for our basic training.
And then, do you recall your basic training at that time? Would you say that it was fairly stringent, or?
Well, it was, yeah, it was, well, let me put it this way. We trained, we stayed in a hotel, a resort hotel. We trained on the beach and on a golf course, which may sound very nice, but we were up on the 6th floor of the hotel, and there was no elevator, and of course no service. And we had to run up and down those stairs many times a day for our various duties. And then to train on the beach in all that sand was not an easy thing to do. It would have been much easier to do on some kind of field with a better surface. So we're doing side straddle hops and so forth and so on out there on the beach. And then we marched on this golf course, which again was nothing but sand by then, because the grass was all gone. It was just available and open, and so we would march out there, and that was not an easy thing to do either. And then we were on Miami Beach, which sounds great, but we couldn't leave the beach and where we were staying, and there were absolutely nothing there but thousands upon thousands of soldiers. So you go down outside the hotel, and there are all these guys just wandering around with nothing to do, nowhere to go, and so that was the contrast between the notion of training on Miami Beach, this wonderful resort area, and the facts of it. It's an interesting contrast, I think.
And you mentioned that there was a large concentration of soldiers there. Were you mixed with civilians at that point?
No, there weren't many. Well, of course there's civilians there, but there weren't many of them. What you saw mostly was just soldiers wandering around. And the training was I don't think was all that tough. I'd played football and basketball and track in high school, and so I was in pretty good shape. So we didn't do anything physically that really bothered me.
And how did you go about getting flight instruction? Was that after your boot camp?
We left there, went to Hiram, Ohio, for what was called CTD, College Training Detachment, and this was a kind of holding pattern, really, what it was. But they gave us college level courses at this college, at Hiram College, and there we also had flight training in Piper Cubs, and that was interesting because I'd got airsick. I thought I was going to have to drop out of the program. But my instructor said, don't worry about it. And when you get into heavier aircraft, that you'll be able to handle it. And I got to where I could pretty much there anyway, and did a passing job of what we had to do there. We soloed in the Piper Cub while we were there.
And then at that point in time, you had mentioned that you had never flown before.
Right.
Did you find a lot of individuals in your class had also not flown?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. As a matter of fact, the people that had the biggest problem were the people who had flown before. Interestingly enough, they had trouble conforming to the Air Corps way of doing things. And I knew of a couple of them who washed out. And here they had private licenses. They couldn't fit they had trouble fitting the mode. So.
Do you recall, was the washout rate pretty high at that point in time? Or?
Well, the washout rate a little later on was extremely high. In fact, by the time I graduated, they pretty well stopped the program. It was there was a kind of a surplus of pilots by that time. But yeah, it was pretty high.
And then how demanding was the instruction to become a pilot?
You had to do it right, and you had to be able, you had to be good at it. But I never had any problem. I never felt, well, there were a couple of times when I thought I was going to be washed out. If you want that story. We were flying in Muskogee, Oklahoma, in PT-19s. This is the primary trainer. This was the next plane up from the Piper Cubs that we flew. And it was a grass field. And we were soloing and so forth and flying. Had certain routines that we had to follow. And so one day I came down, I landed on the field, and it was muddy. And in order, you're supposed to do an S-curve when you're taxiing so that you can clear the area in front of you and see where you're going. And you can't, if you're going straight ahead, you can't see what's ahead of you. So you do this sort of thing. Well, I couldn't do that out in that muddy field because the plane would get stuck. So I was flying straight ahead, and all of a sudden the bottom dropped out and the plane tipped up, and I thought, oh boy. And I looked around, and the prop was broken, and the landing gear was knocked askew and so forth. And well, I've had it. So I started writing out what did the form, I forget the name of the form, the whatever it is, R2 or something. And I figured this is it. I'm out of this program. And I felt a great sense of relief, which was one of the interesting things about that, because I felt all this relief. So I was filling it out and happy and to do it, and so they called me in to meet with the camp commander, the field commander, and it was a civilian field, and so the civilian man was there, and two or three others. And they said, what were you doing? You weren't doing the proper thing. I said, well, wait a minute. Why is there an open ditch, unmarked, out there in that field? It was a ditch. And they all stopped and looked at each other and said, oh, dismissed. And about 5 minutes later, there were trucks out there marking that ditch because they were wrong. And so I not only looked out, but I knew that if I did wash out, I would be relieved. So I relaxed. And after that, I'd been, I guess, much, fairly tense about all this. But after that, I was fine. And I figured if I'm going to wash out, I'll feel good about it. So let's not worry about this thing. Do whatever we can do. So it was a good thing.